humanity had seen war before. They had endured world wars, nuclear brinkmanship, and even interstellar skirmishes with minor alien species. But nothing had prepared them for the Zelari dominion. They arrived like a storm, silent, cold, and merciless. The first sign of their presence was the sudden disappearance of Earth's outermost defense stations, wiped from existence before a distress signal could be sent. Then came the fleet, titanic warships, each the size of a city, dark as the abyss, blotting out the stars as they descended upon Earth's orbital defenses. Commander Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the U.E.S. Titan, Earth's last remaining dreadnought. His hands gripped the console as he watched in horror. The Zelari weapons tore through human ships like paper, their plasma lances cutting through hulls with ruthless precision. Fighters swarmed in a desperate attempt to counter the invasion, but for every alien vessel destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Sir, we've lost the eastern defense grid," shouted Lieutenant Hayes, her voice barely audible over the wailing alarms. "Our shields are failing." Carter knew what that meant. Earth's defenses had crumbled. The battle wasn't just lost, it had never been winnable. "Order all remaining ships to fall back to the surface. Evacuate who we can," Carter said, his voice steadier than he felt. "But sir..." "Do it." As the Titan descended, he saw the horror unfolding below. Alien warforms rained from the sky, biomechanical monstrosities that tore through entire cities in minutes. Plasma barrages reduced metropolises to molten wastelands. Humanity's last strongholds fought desperately, but there was no stopping the invasion. Carter activated the emergency transmission, his voice broadcasting across all surviving UEA channels. "This is General Carter to all remaining forces. The battle is lost. Retreat to designated safe zones. Gather every remaining fighter, every soldier. We make our last stand on Earth. We will not go quietly." As the Titan crashed into the surface, Carter emerged, rifle in hand. The sky burned, the world shook, and humanity stood on the edge of extinction. And yet, they would fight. The fall of Earth's defenses had been swift and brutal. What was once the seat of human civilization was now a battleground of fire and ruin. Yet, despite the overwhelming power of the Zelari dominion, humanity refused to kneel. General Elias Carter crouched in the darkened tunnel of an old subway station, now repurposed as a command post. Around him, survivors, soldiers, engineers, and civilians willing to fight, huddled over flickering holomaps, analyzing every scrap of intelligence they had. "We've lost contact with the European front," Colonel Vasquez reported grimly, rubbing the dirt from his bruised face. "South America is silent. The Zelari are spreading like a plague." Carter exhaled through clenched teeth. He already knew the answer, but he had to ask. "And the ARC project?" Dr. Helen Porter, one of humanity's last remaining scientific minds, hesitated before answering. "We're close. The fusion core is operational, and we've managed to secure enough raw materials to power it. But we need time, General. Time. The one thing they didn't have." Carter turned to the resistance leaders assembled before him. "Then we buy it. No matter the cost. ###### the last survivors." The Zelari had underestimated humanity's will to resist. Across the planet, small cells of fighters waged a brutal guerrilla war against the invaders. Using old subway tunnels, abandoned military bunkers, and hidden supply caches, they struck with precision, crippling enemy supply lines and sabotaging their control hubs. Near what was once Chicago, a squad of elite fighters under Captain Juno Reyes ambushed a Zelari patrol. They used EMP charges to disable the towering warforms before melting them with stolen plasma weapons. Though the Zelari were technologically superior, their arrogance had left them vulnerable. They were built for domination, not for war on this scale. "This is Reyes. The hit was successful. We've recovered supplies and data. Sending coordinates now," she radioed in, breathless from the fight. Carter's voice came through, resolute. "Good work. Fall back to the rally point. We'll need every asset for the counterstrike. ###### hope amidst the ruins. In the depths of an underground research facility, Dr. Porter and her team worked tirelessly. The ARC project was humanity's last desperate hope, an experimental weapon built from stolen alien tech and humanity's greatest scientific advancements. If activated, it could deliver a crippling blow to the Zelari mothership, turning the tide of war. But it wasn't ready. Porter glanced at the chronometer. We need 72 hours, minimum. Carter's jaw tightened. They didn't have 72 hours. ###### The Zelari strike back. As night fell, the Resistance's worst fears were realized. The Zelari had adapted. Their forces began sweeping the underground tunnels, using drones to track down human hideouts with chilling efficiency. The command post trembled as an explosion rocked the tunnel entrance. "They've found us," Vasquez shouted. Carter grabbed his rifle. "Then we make them regret it." The last stand had truly begun. The Resistance had barely enough time to brace for the Zelari assault when the betrayal struck. They had prepared for the alien invaders, but they hadn't accounted for a more insidious enemy, one from within their own ranks. In the midst of the chaos, the distress signals came in too quickly to ignore. The military strongholds that had been in direct communication with Carter were going silent, one after another. Their outposts were raided, their positions compromised. The transmissions that followed were fragmented, but it was clear, someone had been feeding the Zelari the location of every remaining resistance cell. General Carter stood over a holographic map in the dimly lit command center, scanning the reports with increasing dread. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Sir," Colonel Vasquez said as he entered, his face pale, "we've lost contact with the Pacific Coalition forces. They were supposed to help us fortify the Western Front. They're gone." Carter's expression hardened. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" Vasquez looked grim. "All communications were intercepted. We've confirmed, our encrypted channels were breached." "Someone on the inside," he trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. It wasn't just a sabotage, it was a betrayal. The enemy wasn't just the Zelari anymore. ##### the enemy within. The Zelari were relentless, but now they had a new advantage: human collaborators. It had started as whispers, promises of safety and power to those who would side with the invaders. Slowly, quietly, individuals within the Resistance had turned. Some were motivated by fear, others by self-preservation, and others still by the allure of the Zelari's technology. They believed that aligning with the invaders would ensure their survival, or their power in a new world. One of them was Senator Alaric Vega, a former leader in the United Earth Alliance who had vanished after the fall of the government. He was now a puppet of the Zelari, a man who had once been a symbol of hope now reduced to a traitor. Carter's heart sank when he heard the news. Vega had been one of the early advocates for Earth's unity, one of the last voices calling for humanity's resilience. Yet now, he was orchestrating the downfall of all they had fought for. The whispers were true. Vega had been feeding information about resistance movements, helping the Zelari pinpoint the few remaining strongholds. When Carter's own inner circle began to question the vulnerability of their positions, he realized the extent of the damage. ###### a dire choice. The betrayal cut deep, but Carter knew that the fight could not stop now. They had to act, and quickly. Time was running out, and the Zelari were closing in on every remaining resistance position. Carter called a council of his closest allies, Vasquez, Dr. Porter, and a handful of the last loyal officers. "We've lost too many. Our resources are dwindling," Carter began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "But we still have a chance. The Zelari are more dangerous than we knew, and this betrayal," he paused, clenched his fists. "This betrayal ends now." Porter's eyes were hard as stone. "We have the weapon, Elias. But it's not ready. We're running out of time." Carter nodded, his mind racing. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. He turned to Vasquez. Find Vega. We need him alive. We need to know how deep the corruption runs. If we can stop him, we can still recover. I'll organize a team to go after him, Vasquez replied. We'll do whatever it takes. ####### The siege begins. Meanwhile, the Zelari were preparing their final assault. The betrayal had given them what they needed, the precise locations of Earth's last remaining strongholds. Carter could hear the distant rumble of war as the enemy began its push. Tanks and ground units tore through the Earth's surface, sweeping away any human resistance with ease. In the distance, a massive Zelari dropship hovered, its guns trained on the remnants of the eastern outpost. The last bastion of human hope lay in the shadows of that siege. The clock was ticking, and Carter had one last card to play, the weapon that Dr. Porter had worked tirelessly to complete. But as the walls closed in, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still yet to come. The traitors in their midst would soon be revealed, and when they were, they would ensure that humanity's last stand would be remembered, no matter the cost. The world had already been torn apart, but humanity's spirit had not yet broken. As the Zelari forces drew closer to the last stronghold in the North American sector, General Carter knew that this would be Earth's final stand. The time for hesitation was over. It was time for a desperate gambit that could either turn the tide of the war, or seal humanity's fate forever. Carter stood in the shadow of the underground resistance base, staring at the large holographic display in front of him. The ARC project, humanity's most advanced weapon, was nearly ready. Dr. Porter had been working tirelessly for weeks to complete it, but now it was down to the wire. General, Porter said, approaching with a sense of urgency. The weapon is operational. The fusion core is stable, and we've uploaded the targeting protocols. It's as ready as it's ever going to be. She hesitated. But the charge will take time to build up. We'll need a few hours before it reaches full power. Carter clenched his fists. We don't have a few hours. The Zelari are about to launch their final assault, and we can't afford to wait. Then we do what we must, Porter replied, her voice unwavering. We use it now. No one knows how long the system will stay stable. We fire everything we have into their fleet. It's the only chance we have. Carter nodded. It was a dangerous move, one with no guarantees. But what other choice did they have? ######### A bold plan. Carter had devised a plan, a reckless one, but their only option. The Resistance's remaining forces would mount a massive counteroffensive, launching a series of hit-and-run attacks to distract the Zelari forces. At the same time, Carter would lead a small elite strike team to infiltrate the Zelari command ship, the Oblivion, and deliver a devastating blow to their flagship. We hit them hard, Carter said as he addressed the officers and soldiers gathered around the command table. We engage their outer defense lines and draw their attention. We'll make sure they think they're facing an army, not just a few dozen men and women. While they're distracted, a small team will board the Oblivion. Our mission: sabotage their central command core and activate the weapon. We end this war now. Vasquez, the seasoned veteran, nodded firmly. You know it's a suicide mission, right? Carter's gaze hardened. Yes. But it's the only way. Porter looked uncertain. If we don't fire the weapon at the core, we won't destroy their fleet. It'll still be able to regroup and recover. And they'll know our plans. Once we fire, they'll be looking for us. Carter turned to the scientist, determination in his eyes. Then we make sure they never get the chance. ######### The assault. The resistance fighters mobilized swiftly, ready to make their final push. Carter's team, including Vasquez, Reyes, and a few other loyal soldiers, prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. As the Oblivion descended toward Earth's atmosphere, the battlefield around them was filled with the roars of combat. Explosions rocked the surface as the Zelari fired upon key human locations, hoping to finish them off. But the resistance had already begun its counterattack. old tanks, modified drones, and stolen alien weapons were unleashed in a wave of destruction. The Zelari were forced to adapt, throwing all their forces into the fray to quell the human resistance. As the enemy forces began to engage, Carter's strike team boarded a stolen Zelari shuttle and made their way to the Oblivion. ###### the infiltration. The Oblivion was a fortress. Its sleek, obsidian surface gleamed under the dim light of Earth's dying sun. As Carter's shuttle landed, the team suited up, steeling themselves for the mission ahead. The atmosphere inside the ship was oppressive, alien and sterile, as if the vessel itself were a living thing. Their first obstacle came quickly. Zelari drones patrolled the corridors, their unnatural movements making them almost impossible to predict. Reyes, quick as ever, took down the first two with silent precision. "We move fast. We can't afford to get caught," Carter whispered, leading the charge. As they navigated through the ship's labyrinthine hallways, the crew encountered resistance, Zelari soldiers, far more dangerous up close than Carter had imagined. But they pushed on, knowing the stakes. Every moment counted. Finally, they reached the core, the heart of the Oblivion. It was a massive, glowing structure at the center of the ship, pulsing with dark energy. Carter approached the console, inputting the command codes that Dr. Porter had devised. The system hummed to life, and the countdown began. #######, the countdown begins. "We've got 5 minutes, Carter said, his heart pounding in his chest. The entire team worked furiously to ensure the detonation sequence was initiated. They were so close. But then the unthinkable happened. A force field activated around the core, trapping the team inside. "We're locked in," Vasquez shouted. The countdown continued. There was no time left. The team prepared for their final act, knowing they would never leave the ship alive. The explosion would be their legacy. The countdown to destruction echoed in the cold silence of the Oblivion's core room. The resistance team had made it this far, but now the cost of their bold strike was becoming clear. The force field had trapped them inside the heart of the Zelari flagship, the weapon primed to obliterate the alien fleet, but at a devastating price. They would not make it out alive. Carter stood at the central console, his hand hovering over the activation sequence. His breath was shallow, his heart racing as the seconds ticked down. 4 minutes left. "We can't disable it," Vasquez said, his voice strained. He was scanning the control panels with rapid urgency, trying to find a way to stop the sequence. "We're committed now. There's no turning back." Reyes was positioned near the door, eyes scanning the corridors. They had no idea how much longer they would have before the Zelari forces discovered their breach. "We've bought Earth some time," she said, voice steady but laden with the reality of their situation. "If this works, humanity will have a chance. We can't waste it." Carter glanced at each of them. His team, the few who had made it this far. Their faces were covered in grime, their bodies battered, but their resolve was unwavering. They had come this far, not for their survival, but for humanity's. The countdown continued, 3 minutes and 30 seconds. #######, a glimmer of hope. Outside the core room, the sound of approaching Zelari soldiers echoed through the halls. The ship was on high alert, the presence of the resistance known across its vast systems. The moment the force field had activated, the alarms had blared, and reinforcements had begun pouring in from every direction. The team had no time to spare. They had to hold the line, even if they could only do so for a few minutes. "Carter," Reyes said sharply. "We need to move. The Zelari are coming." "We're not going anywhere," Carter replied. "The weapon has to fire. We're the last line of defense now." The team braced themselves as the first wave of Zelari soldiers rounded the corner. They were faster, stronger, and more numerous than anything the resistance had fought before, but the humans' determination was a force to be reckoned with. The resistance team opened fire. Vasquez and Reyes moved with deadly precision, taking down the Zelari soldiers as Carter held the line at the console. He glanced back at the countdown. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Keep them off us. Carter shouted. We're so close. ###### The Last Stand. The battle was brutal. The Zelari soldiers were relentless, their advanced armor and weapons tearing into the resistance team's positions. But Carter's team fought with a ferocity born of desperation. They had no other choice. Vasquez shouted, "We're outnumbered. We won't be able to hold them back for long." But Carter refused to acknowledge the possibility of defeat. "Just keep them busy. We've got 2 minutes to end this." As the battle raged, Carter's mind raced. In that brief window of time, the hopes of humanity rested entirely on their success. This weapon, this last-ditch effort, was all they had left. If they could fire it before the Zelari overwhelmed them, they would give Earth a fighting chance. 1 minute left. The soldiers of the Resistance were fighting like wolves, taking down Zelari with every shot, but their ammunition was running low. Reyes had already suffered a wound to her leg but refused to fall back. Vasquez was taking the brunt of the enemy's assault, each bullet fired a testament to his unwavering will. "We're almost there," Carter said, his voice now a rasp, his hands steady on the control panel. Suddenly, the door to the core room exploded open, and a surge of Zelari soldiers flooded in, guns blazing. Reyes let out a cry of pain as one of them took her down, but she managed to take 2 more out before collapsing. Carter's heart clenched. No! He rushed to her side, but it was too late. She was gone. Vasquez grabbed Carter's arm. "It's over. We need to get out, now." But Carter's eyes were fixed on the console. "We've come this far," he said quietly. "We finish what we started." ######## The final blow. With less than 30 seconds on the clock, Carter made his decision. He input the final command to launch the weapon. The Ark project roared to life, its energy coursing through the ship's core. A blinding light filled the room as the weapon powered up, the force of its energy shaking the entire vessel. "It's done," Carter said, voice trembling with the weight of what they had just accomplished. "The weapon is firing." But the price was steep. As the countdown reached its final moments, the ship began to shake violently. Explosions rang out from all sides. The core room was rapidly falling apart. Carter could feel the ship buckling under the pressure, and he knew they didn't have much longer. Carter looked at Vasquez. "Get to the escape pods. Go." But Vasquez only shook his head. "You're not leaving without me." Before they could argue further, the Oblivion lurched violently, and a shockwave ripped through the ship. The weapon had fired. The Zelari fleet was struck by a catastrophic blast, and the once unimaginable power of the Ark project had devastated their command fleet. In that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, it was over. ######## The cost of victory. As the smoke cleared, the remaining Resistance fighters huddled together in the ruins of the Oblivion. The Zelari fleet had been crippled, but at an unimaginable cost. The Resistance was all but wiped out, and the team that had led the charge, Carter, Vasquez, Reyes, and the others, were gone. But the weapon had worked. The Zelari were no longer an invincible force. And Earth would live to fight another day. The last stand of humanity had been a sacrifice. But in that sacrifice, there was hope. The echoes of the Oblivion's destruction still rang across the shattered remnants of the battlefield. The once mighty fleet of the Zelari was now crippled, its core forces decimated by the powerful blast of the Ark project. But the victory, though monumental, had come at a terrible price. Earth's defenders were gone, and in their place, only empty silence and smoke remained. But the Zelari had underestimated humanity's tenacity. Though their fleet lay broken in the void of space, there was still something that would continue to rise from the ashes, something the aliens could never understand, the resilience of the human spirit. ######## The last survivors. In the aftermath of the battle, a handful of survivors emerged from the wreckage of the Oblivion. General Elias Carter, though injured and battered, had clung to life long enough to witness the devastating success of the weapon. Alongside him was Colonel Vasquez, who had somehow made it to one of the escape pods despite the odds, and a few other scattered soldiers, who had managed to survive the final fight. But the cost was evident. The human resistance had been nearly wiped out. No more reinforcements were coming. The remaining pockets of survivors, now scattered across Earth's remaining territories, were all that was left of humanity's once proud fighting force. Carter sat in a makeshift command center, surrounded by the remnants of the resistance. His body was bruised and bloodied, but his mind was sharp. Vasquez had done the unthinkable, gathering a few brave soldiers to rally what remained of Earth's defenses. "The Zelari think we're finished," Vasquez said as he surveyed the fractured map of Earth on the screen in front of them. "They'll think their victory is complete. But they're wrong. We've got time. Enough time to rebuild." Carter looked up at Vasquez, his eyes hard. "Time is all we need. We've struck them where it hurts. They'll be reeling from this for years. But we can't let our guard down." "Absolutely," Vasquez replied. "And when the time comes, we make sure they know we're still here. We're not going to let this world fall to them." Though the fighting was far from over, the flames of resistance burned brightly once again. For the first time since the fall of Earth's defenses, the survivors began to gather, banding together for what would be a long and difficult recovery. There were no illusions of a quick victory, but they had something the Zelari would never understand: the will to survive. ####### A changing world. As the months passed, humanity began to rebuild in the aftermath of the destruction. Cities that had been reduced to rubble slowly began to rise again. The remnants of Earth's military, what few forces remained, slowly gathered strength from the ashes. They found allies in the most unexpected places, scattered human colonies across the stars that had been cut off from Earth during the early days of the invasion, who now returned to join the fight. Human ingenuity, the very thing that had sparked their initial rise to power, became their greatest weapon. Earth's fractured governments began to reassemble, forming a new alliance, one that embraced their shared history and new, unparalleled resolve. And with the alliance came new technologies that had once been thought impossible. Earth's scientists, including Dr. Porter, had gone to work on developing weapons, defensive systems, and technologies that rivaled even the Zelari's finest. Humanity's ingenuity and relentless drive became their edge. Though the Zelari had once believed their conquest of Earth would be swift and absolute, they had underestimated the adaptability of humans. ####### The Galactic Reclamation. But the fight for Earth was not over. The Zelari had learned from their mistakes, and they were not willing to surrender the prize they had invested so much to capture. After recovering from the catastrophic loss of their fleet, they began a slow, steady buildup of their forces. But this time, the situation was different. Humanity's forces, though small, had something that the Zelari never expected: unity. Earth had united like never before, and the remnants of the human race were determined to fight for their home. Carter knew that their victory against the Zelari flagship was only the beginning. The next battle would take them to the very gates of the Zelari Empire. They would make the invaders regret ever underestimating the humans they had dismissed as insignificant. "There's no going back now," Carter said as he surveyed the new fleet of human ships, each one outfitted with the best technology humanity could muster. "We've taken back what's ours, but now we're going to take the fight to them." The Earth Federation had formed from the ashes of the Resistance, a coalition of the best and brightest humanity had to offer, determined to show the Zelari the price of underestimating Earth. It would be a fight for survival, yes, but it would also be a fight for Earth's future in the galaxy. ###### The Phoenix Rising. The first fleet of the Phoenix Armada, named after humanity's rebirth from the ashes of their defeat, prepared to launch its first offensive strike against the Zelari's outer colonies. It was a small fleet by galactic standards, but it was fueled by the passion and unyielding determination of humanity, and it carried with it the hopes of an entire species. For the first time in years, Earth survivors saw the stars above them not as a vast, empty void, but as a place where their future could still unfold. "Prepare for launch," Carter said, standing in the command center, looking out at the fleet through the glass windows. The countdown began. And as the Phoenix Armada ascended into the heavens, humanity took its first step toward reclaiming the stars, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they would not be wiped from existence. The Zelari had made their greatest mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. And now, the galaxy would learn just how powerful a determined few could be. The Phoenix Armada, Earth's final hope, soared toward the Zelari heart of power. Their fleet, though small compared to the vast forces that had once threatened to crush Earth, had something the Zelari could never anticipate: the resolve and ingenuity of humanity. Every ship in the fleet had been equipped with the latest human-made technology, crafted through sheer will and relentless determination. Every pilot, soldier, and strategist was driven by the knowledge that their survival, and the future of their species, depended on the success of this mission. General Elias Carter stood at the helm of the flagship, the Perseverance, his eyes scanning the stars ahead. The scars of battle were still fresh on his face, a reminder of the countless sacrifices made by those who had come before him. But there was something in the air now, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "We're almost there," Carter said quietly to his commanding officer, Colonel Vasquez, who was standing beside him, staring intently at the holographic map of the Zelari Empire. Vasquez nodded, his expression hard but focused. "They'll be expecting us. But they won't be ready for what's coming. We're not the same humans they tried to erase. We're better. Smarter. Stronger." Carter clapped him on the shoulder. "We've already proven that. Now, let's show them what happens when you push humanity to the edge." ###### The Zelari counterattack. The Zelari, having fully recovered from their losses, were prepared for an all-out retaliation. Their advanced fleet, now reinforced and restructured, awaited the human assault in their deep space fortress, their primary stronghold. The Zelari had thought that humanity, after the destruction of its homeworld and the decimation of their forces, would retreat into the shadows. They were wrong. Earth's survivors had rallied around the Phoenix Armada, determined not to let their species fall into oblivion. "We can't underestimate them," said Admiral Zykor, the Zelari commander, watching from his command station aboard the Oblivion's Wrath, his flagship. "The humans may be small, but they have something we've never encountered before: resilience." Zykor's plan was to encircle the humans in a deadly trap. He had positioned his fleet in a formation designed to overwhelm them with superior numbers and firepower. The Zelari had all but assured themselves of victory, dismissing the humans as mere insects to be crushed. But what the Zelari didn't understand was that the Phoenix Armada was no longer just a collection of soldiers and ships. It was a symbol. A symbol of the undying will of humanity. ######## The first strike. The battle began with a barrage of fire. The Phoenix Armada moved with precision, their ships darting in and out of the enemy lines, using tactics and technology the Zelari had never expected. The humans had taken the lessons of their past defeats and transformed them into an unstoppable fighting force. The Zelari fleet, with its overwhelming size, began to falter as the humans executed a series of devastating strikes. Carter's flagship, the Perseverance, led the charge, dodging incoming fire from the Zelari warships while unleashing their own advanced weaponry. The Zelari's attempt to trap the human fleet was failing. The Phoenix Armada was using their agility to exploit the gaps in the Zelari's formation. "It's working!" Vasquez shouted, a grin spreading across his face. "They're losing their grip." But the Zelari were not done yet. Their flagship, the Oblivion's Wrath, unleashed a final, desperate salvo, an energy weapon so powerful it could wipe out entire fleets in a single shot. The humans knew they had mere moments before the weapon discharged. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Carter barked, adrenaline surging through his veins. "If that weapon hits us, it's over." The Perseverance juked and dived, narrowly avoiding the incoming beam of energy. The Zelari flagship had underestimated the humans' ability to adapt and respond. Their weapon missed by mere inches, instead striking the Zelari fleet directly. The blast tore through their ranks, decimating their forces in a catastrophic explosion. Turning the tide. With their flagship's weapon disabled, the Zelari forces were thrown into disarray. Now, humanity's ships surged forward, pushing the Zelari back with coordinated attacks. The Phoenix Armada's maneuverability and ingenuity outmatched the Zelari's overwhelming numbers. Carter issued the order for the final push. "We've fought too hard to let this slip away now. Take down their command center." The Phoenix Armada, emboldened by their initial successes, surged forward, their battle cries echoing across the comm channels. The Oblivion's wrath, once an impenetrable symbol of Zelari superiority, was now within striking distance. "We've reached the target," Carter said, voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Prepare to deploy the assault team. This ends today." The final assault. A strike team of elite soldiers, led by Vasquez, boarded a Zelari boarding craft and infiltrated the Oblivion's wrath. The assault team fought their way through the Zelari vessel, cutting down enemy soldiers with expert precision. They reached the core of the ship, where the final confrontation awaited. The fate of humanity now rested on their ability to destroy the central control hub of the Zelari war machine. "We're almost there," Vasquez grunted, his voice strained as he ducked behind cover and fired at the advancing Zelari troops. The team fought their way into the heart of the ship, where they planted explosives and set the countdown. With mere seconds left, they made their way back to the escape pod. The Oblivion's wrath would soon be nothing but a burning wreck, taking the Zelari's hopes of galactic dominance with it. Victory. As the countdown on the Oblivion's wrath reached zero, the Zelari flagship erupted in a violent explosion, disintegrating in the blink of an eye. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, causing devastation across the Zelari fleet. Without their central command, the Zelari forces began to retreat, their once imposing empire crumbling before the might of the Phoenix Armada. On Earth, the survivors watched as their ships emerged victorious. The Phoenix Armada had completed its mission, striking at the heart of the Zelari war machine. The invaders who had once thought humanity insignificant now knew the price of their arrogance. As the last of the Zelari ships fled into the void, Carter stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, watching the stars above. Earth had won. Humanity had reclaimed their future. "They'll never underestimate us again," Vasquez said, standing next to him. "No," Carter replied, his voice steady. "We're just getting started." The last remnants of the Zelari fleet had been vanquished. Humanity had not only survived, it had conquered. And now, they would reclaim their place in the galaxy, proving that even the smallest, most determined species could rise to greatness. And as the Phoenix Armada sailed toward the stars, the legacy of humanity's resilience would echo through the galaxy forever. The last stand of humanity had become the first victory of a new era.